Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the City Council Urban Affairs and Housing Committee meeting to order. It is Wednesday, April 29th. We have one item on our agenda, order number 26-109-706, a review of the draft 2026 Marlboro Forward Plan with public comment being allowed, and we asked for comments to be sent to the City Council. I do not believe the council was sent any, but I received an email from a constituent that I will discuss as we move forward. So we have with us tonight the writers of the draft Marlboro Forward Plan. MEDC's executive director is also with us. So Meredith, if you want to come to the well with Eric and Eric, introduce them, please. They have some slides to present.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you all for having us tonight. We're excited to talk about the forward plan. We've been working on this for about a year, I would say, a little less maybe but less. Somewhere around there. But excited to talk about what we're considering the addition, I don't want to say addition, but the new plan from the master plan from 2011. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce both Eric and Eric from RKG, which is the consultant that MEDC has been working with to update the 2011 master plan. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Great, thanks.
It was working when we were sitting there, I guess. There you go.
You really have to. Okay, thanks. Hi, good evening, council members. Eric Halverson, principal with RKG Associates, and joined also by my colleague who helped with the project, Eric Wojcicki, also associate principal at RKG. And yeah, we've got a long history working with Marlboro. That even I've been with the firm 10 years. It predates my time. Worked on a lot of projects with the city, so we're really excited when Meredith and the board contacted us about helping to update the plan and sort of looking forward over the next 5 to 10 years for MEDC. Can you go to the next slide? Great.
You got to point at the computer down at the bottom. I can try moving the podium.
It's okay.
It was a really interesting road to get to from where we started to where I think we are today. In that, I think when we started talking with Meredith originally, it was truly sort of an update to the plan from 10 years ago, and it was going to largely be focused on MEDC and efforts around economic development. But I guess through discussions with staff and council members and board members, it kind of morphed into a little bit more than that. And hopefully you see that when you read the plan, in that it kind of is more of a forward-looking strategy, not only for MEDC, but for the city, as you all are grappling with different, I think, key questions, not just around economic development, but also around housing, around land use, around the impact of development, around operational and capital capacity in the city. So a lot of really interesting topics that we have dealt with in many other communities, and we're really excited to dive into. So that's really what the forward plan tries to do, is kind of provide a roadmap for, hopefully for decision making, kind of at a citywide perspective. So I thought I would just go through a couple of key, I think we had maybe 7 sort of key economic trends that we saw that kind of shaped our goals for the plan and also the strategies that we put forward in the plan. And I'll sort of just hit on kind of one thing on each of these slides, hopefully go pretty quickly. I think one of the biggest things, and I mean, having lived in Massachusetts for quite some time, I've sort of known this about Marlboro, but it's always impressive to see the data. Marlboro really is a regional employment and retail and sort of recreation hub out here in Metro West. Obviously, there are larger cities like Worcester nearby, but Marlboro, I think, for its size, really punches well above its weight. There's a lot of people who enter this community every day, over almost 33,000 folks who don't live here but work here that enter the community on a daily or at least sometime during the week when they're working basis. And there's only about 16,000 Marlboro residents that are leaving each day to work somewhere outside of Marlboro. So during the daytime, your population sort of remains high, but it's a totally different group of folks who are coming in here, and they're contributing to the economy in a unique way. Over the last 5 years or so, basically from 2019 to 2024, or to 2026, Marlboro recovered relatively quickly from the pandemic, unlike a lot of other cities and towns around the country. And I think over that period of time, you actually gained about 5,000 jobs. So even though COVID did, it did slow things for a little bit, you're on the recovery. And what we see in terms of the economy in Marlboro is your strengths continue to be in company headquarters that want to be here because of your location, the availability of real estate and land, transportation accessibility, centralness in the state, and also workforce talent. You also have a lot of sort of administrative services that are in support of a lot of your key industries. And there are also large hubs in things like manufacturing, which is that big red dot that you see. You have a specialization in manufacturing, even though about 300 jobs were lost over that 5 or 6 year period. Manufacturing is still a big piece of your economy, along with financial insurance services, certainly healthcare, and then other services that you have like accommodations and food services. So that would be your hotels and your restaurants and your breweries. Retail trade, of course, you've got the mall, and you've got a lot of other major retail centers along Route 20. So the diversity of your economy, I think, is a huge strength, and something that as we go forward, I think you'll want to sort of concentrate on continuing.
Can I get a quick question?
Why don't you wait to hold your questions till we,
I just want a definition on this screen.
all right, go ahead.
Okay. Admin and waste services. What actually is that?
It's not so much on the waste side, but it's more on the admin. So it'll be a lot of the support services for like office jobs. So it might be an administrative assistant or folks who are sort of helping with more administrative duties within the economy.
And the waste is which?
Yeah, it would be.
I mean, it's a big chunk. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, but sorry. So the biggest chunk in there is going to be the admin services piece, not the waste services piece. But the federal government, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, lumps those codes together for whatever reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, no
I appreciate
problem.
that.
Yep.
Okay.
And just to sort of back up what I was saying too, we pulled some data on the number of businesses as well as the employees that are associated with those businesses in Marlboro across some of your sort of big subsectors. Professional, scientific, and technical services is a really big sector here and very unique to Marlboro, given sort of your location pretty far from Boston by all means, an hour away. There are 240 businesses and 3,800 employees that are working in that sector, and those are your sort of higher tech, higher education, higher earning jobs in the sciences, engineering, IT industries, life sciences, things like that. So great to see that subsector have such a presence here. IT and tech services is another one, 38 businesses, but 670 employees. So not as many businesses, but larger employment base. That's everything to do with computers. There's a big advanced manufacturing sector here, so 2,900 employees. That's your semiconductor manufacturing, that's navigation, aeronautic systems, and then of course healthcare, another big one at 1,700 employees. So a lot of diversity, but also in sectors that are very strong in Massachusetts. And also, if you look at the statewide economic development strategic plan that was released, sectors that align really nicely with where the Commonwealth wants to go and what they're trying to incentivize in terms of jobs. Just shifting gears from sort of the traditional office employment and industrial employment, just to talk about kind of your amenities sector, your retail, your restaurants, your hospitality. Marlboro is also unique in that for a city of its size, it has a number of different retail areas that we looked at and studied them more closely in the larger plan. But just to touch on them, Route 20, major east-west spine that runs all the way across Marlboro and into connecting communities. It also comes right through the downtown as well. So along that stretch, you have kind of a mix of very small scale, walkable retail centers like downtown, but then you also have larger scale sort of retail centers with your traditional big box stores, your power centers, your retail centers. You also have really kind of unique retail places like the RK Center, which has an awesome mix of restaurants and entertainment and different types of businesses. On top of that, you also have this whole Donald Lynch Boulevard area, sort of the mix of the mall as it transitions over time, and a lot of the big box development there. So a lot of different offerings that Marlboro has from a local and regional perspective. And when we, and when we took a look at, we were able to get data on visitation. So folks who are coming to Marlboro from other communities, where are the highest numbers of visitors coming from? The darker the red color on the map, the higher the percentage of visitors to Marlboro in a given year. And you can see communities like Worcester and Hudson, obviously along Route 20 in the case of Worcester and Shrewsbury, and then obviously north-south, good connections into Hudson. Marlboro on a daily basis is drawing a lot of folks from the immediate region because you have things that many of the other communities may not have, or you have quantities of things that they may not have. So a really unique position. A lot of those visitors are high-income earners, so they're coming to your community bringing disposable income. And the employees are also bringing disposable income for things like, I need to go to the grocery store, I might get my dry cleaning done here, I go out to lunch, I go out to breakfast, I go out to dinner. So when we combine Marlboro resident spending, all the employees that you have on a daily basis, and the visitation that the city is experiencing from those who live outside, there's sort of a great story about, I think, why Marlboro's retail and restaurant sectors are doing really well. I know there's a lot on the slide. It was sort of pulled from the plan, but on the right, you see a list of the sort of the top 15 or so highest visitation locations in Marlboro over the past year. So you'll see the RK Center, it's drawing 4.4 million visitors. Those aren't unique visitors. Those could be somebody visiting multiple times, but just in terms of volume, to the downtown, the Village District, 2.6 million, Marlboro Commons, 2.3, Post Road Plaza. So again, a lot of your big retail and sort of walkable center districts are bringing a lot of people in, and they're spending time and they're spending money. So building on that, we also looked at the Village Center downtown as its own kind of place and area, and we expand upon this a little bit more in the report. But that generation of over 2.6 million visitor trips per year is the second highest next to the RK Center and the Apex area. And you can see this heat map that we have on the bottom left of the screen. The darker the red, the higher the percentage of where those visitors are coming from. So again, it's very hyper-local. A lot of folks that are living in Marlboro, living in Hudson, maybe on the adjacent areas of surrounding towns, those are the folks who are coming more often than not to the Village Center for various reasons. Not so much when you get further away, because as you get further away, particularly toward Worcester, as you get closer to Boston, a lot of towns have city downtowns or town downtowns that offer maybe not the exact same thing or the same quality, but they do have restaurants and they do have places to go. But I think it's really unique, sort of the concentration of folks who are local and are coming to your town center. Your city center, I should say. Another trend, and probably one that we'll spend some time talking about, I'm sure, is sort of the impact of COVID on real estate sectors. The first one we wanted to look at is sort of the older office and the transition of that older office and flex space and sort of how it's been performing over time. The thing I wanted to draw your attention to on this slide is the graphic in the middle and the orange line that's running from left to right and up and down. That is historic and current vacancy rates for the office sector in Marlboro's submarket. So Marlboro and its surrounding communities are part of kind of a larger economic submarket for office. And you can see, vacancy historically has hovered in the kind of 12 to 15% range. Post-COVID, we had sort of some corrections and a dip. And then all of a sudden, sort of after 2021, middle of 2021, vacancy starts to climb as folks haven't necessarily returned to work full time. Businesses begin to right-size the amount of space that they have and the amount of space that they need. And today, as we sit in the submarket, we're sort of at record high vacancies, around 17% or so. So that sort of leads us to the question of, is this a sustained trend? And if it is, how should Marlboro begin to position some of those older office assets? This map, which unfortunately got shifted up a little bit, so the circles aren't exactly where we had them in the report. The circles should sort of be over areas that correspond with parcels that are colored in a more darker color, as well as dots that are of a darker or of a lighter color, or sorry, of a darker color. So dark and dark, where those overlap, those are your most distressed assets right now. So those would be your older office assets, as well as office assets in terms of buildings that have the highest vacancy rates right now. And a lot of that overlaps with the Southwest Quadrant area, of course, because that's where you have the majority of your large office product, and a lot of it that tended to be built sort of in the 80s and the 90s. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we sort of did this to start to identify, well, if you were thinking about making some changes in an area and start to reposition those assets, where might you concentrate that rather than having kind of a blanket citywide approach? And the interesting thing when we dive in a little bit more, this is just a little slice here of the Southwest Quadrant. You know, we see sort of large footprint buildings where the floor plates are quite large. And then they're surrounded by a lot of surface parking. At the time when these were built, that was probably the most efficient way to deal with buildings and the most efficient way to deal with parking. And you had a lot of land out here compared to, you know, more of a Boston or Somerville, Cambridge City environment where people are going to underground or deck parking. So this is the kind of development pattern that we have out there. And as we're thinking about repositioning assets, it's sort of I think it's a good thing in some ways because we have a lot to work with. We don't just have the building, we also have the parking. So we could potentially think about intensifying the uses or intensifying the amount of development in these areas to try to maximize revenue for the city over time. As we think about maximizing revenue, we kind of looked at revenue generation for the city in two different ways. So this map here shows the total assessed value of every parcel, every privately owned parcel in the city of Marlborough. The darker the color, the higher the total assessed value on a total value scale. So you see, if I sort of direct your attention to the Southwest Quadrant area, there's a lot of dark gray in that area, suggesting that those parcels are assessed at or are driving a lot of assessed value compared to other parts of the city. If we look at it a different way in terms of how do we measure development intensity against assessed value, which is the next slide, you see a very different picture. And if I was able to interact with this map, I would zoom in on the downtown area where the parcels are very small and the colors are very dark gray, suggesting that smaller parcels with a high intensity of development on a per acre basis are really driving much of the value in the city. And the area in the Southwest Quadrant where the parcels are much larger, the buildings take up a smaller percentage of the parcel, and parking takes up a lot of that area, we see on a per acre basis that development or that assessed value coming down. The interesting thing before Meredith goes on is in the green district, you'll see that little quadrant there in that southwest portion of the city. Those parcels continue to pop. That's sort of partially because the intensity of development on those parcels with the multifamily residential is a lot higher than the office. And the rents are very high because that development is very new. So it's interesting to see that pop compared to a lot of the other sort of older developments in the Southwest Quadrant. Shifting gears a little bit toward housing, we were asked to sort of do a housing needs analysis as part of the forward plan because I know there's been a ton of interest and continues to be in housing development across the city. Sort of driving that are a couple of things. One, your population continues to grow. You've had about 3,300 new residents, or you're projected to grow by 3,300 new residents, and you have grown by about 1,398 since about 2020. So you saw a bump with COVID. That's kind of flattened off over the last couple of years, but you are a growing city, which is not the case for a lot of places in Massachusetts. And when things are built, particularly on the multifamily housing side, when new units are delivered to the market, they are absorbed very quickly, and they have very little long-term impact on the vacancy rate. So in this case, the orange line that's going up and down quite a bit, wherever you see that line going up, that typically means that a large building or development was delivered to the market. But then the vacancy rate drops pretty quickly within a quarter or within a year or two, back down to historic vacancy rates hovering in the 3 to 4% range, meaning somebody builds something, they put 100, 200 units on the market, about three quarters of the year later, those are all absorbed, vacancy comes right back down to historic rates, and that's been the pattern. This is not unique to Marlborough, the submarket, we see this all over Massachusetts. But it's kind of why people are continuing to build. And the other thing that's driving some of that demand is single-family homes and sale prices are really expensive. The graphic on the left, the red line there shows Marlborough's median sale price going back to 2015. You can see basically by 2020 and going forward, the prices went from just under $400,000 on average, or the median sale price, to over $600,000 in just a couple of years. It's also we just compared here to the Boston Metro and also Middlesex County just to see sort of where Marlborough stacks up. So you are technically still a more quote-unquote affordable option than a lot of other places, certainly in the Metro and Middlesex County. But your housing prices continue to get less and less affordable to people of certain incomes. On the rental side, which is on the right, you can see a very similar trajectory. Post-2020, things have escalated substantially. That's both rents just going up in general because of demand, but also new product that is entering the market is also driving that rent up.
Meredith, can you go back? Councilor Navin has a clarifying question.
Yeah, just one more slide, Meredith, if you could. The stat that says 60% of homes are sold over asking, what's the time period if then that was kind of calculated? And have you guys seen a shift just from when the report was completed? Just trying to have a better understanding of that.
Yep.
So that's Redfin data from 2015 to when would you say about?
Sometime in 2025, probably late 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that does capture the higher interest rate time period as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. Yeah. So those are just some of the key economic trends. Again, in the report, there's a lot more detail. So once we had all those on paper, discussed them with Meredith and staff and the board, we started to look at, well, based on all of these trends that we see, both positive and challenges, what are the opportunities that are out there that we see and that Marlborough may want to focus on going forward? One that I think is key is just continuing the good work that the city has done to keep Marlborough top of mind and make sure that everybody knows that we are a regional employment hub for this area and for this portion of the Commonwealth, and we want to continue to do that. So some of the strategies we have will back that up. The second one is, as we're looking at older properties or the opportunities to reposition properties, how do we do that strategically, and how do we then market to and invite in the industry sectors where we have existing strengths going forward? Life sciences, tech, advanced manufacturing, and where appropriate, thinking about introducing residential or mixed-use development. The third one is around continued housing demand and population growth. So as the sort of regional economy continues to expand, demand for housing, I don't think is going anywhere. People continue to want to live both in Marlborough as well as in the Commonwealth. So continuing to focus on that and, thinking about housing where it makes sense. Given the visitation to downtown and all the work that's been going on in downtown, I think continuing to strengthen downtown as kind of that walkable mixed-use center. There's a lot of folks from around this immediate region that are coming here and visiting that downtown. And then the last one is just leveraging your transportation connectivity to state highways and also interstates, as well as the infrastructure that you have serving some of your primary growth areas. You have water, you have sewer, you have power, you have transportation, you have public services. There are a lot of communities that are certainly smaller than you that don't offer all those services or don't offer them at the level that Marlborough does. On the challenges side, I think the structural changes to the office market are really important to pay attention to, as I mentioned before. I think managing the transition of some of those employment districts, you all are on the sort of front lines of that transition, like in the Southwest Quadrant. Right, you have seen some proposals in the past. I think you're seeing more that are sort of coming before you. So just thinking critically about that and thinking about some of the strategies we have in here as you're weighing what you want to do as a city. making sure you continue, and I think you've done a great job, balancing growth with infrastructure and service capacity. So sort of trying to mirror or to marry those two, and making sure that as you expand, what kinds of land use and zoning decisions, development decisions you're making as a city and council, you're sort of mirroring that with infrastructure investments and making sure that you have those in place. Whatever you can do on housing affordability always helps. We have some suggestions there, a pressure that's facing us all over the Commonwealth. And then just thinking a little bit about the aging housing stock and also the limited housing diversity. So there's a lot of housing in the single family and sort of 2 and 3 family range in Marlboro, and more recently a lot more housing on the larger multifamily side. But in most communities that we work in, there's what they call the missing middle. It's sort of the middle stuff that we used to build a fair amount of, like small townhouses, small apartments, multiple homes on a lot, those kinds of things that I think could fit well in Marlboro, particularly in some of the areas in and around the village center where you already have a little bit of that housing stock, but maybe loosening some zoning restrictions and getting a little bit more of that. The reason for that being, it doesn't always have to be rental. The sort of missing middle could potentially be sort of entry ownership housing stock as well. If you can get the density in there, the housing prices could come down a bit and make some more entry-level housing. Then we wanted to do something a little different with this plan, and we kind of decided to build it around 5 different themes that we could carry the strategies through. And these are sort of repetitive to the opportunities, but again, Marlboro's a regional hub, reimagining those underperforming places, thinking more about downtown village center, expanding housing, and then guiding growth and infrastructure alongside each other. I won't spend a ton of time on this, but one way that we were starting to think about this and working with MEDC and the board on was thinking about, like, what is the value, not just of the city of Marlboro, but of the places within Marlboro. Each of the locations that we've talked about, from the area up by the mall to the village center to your different neighborhoods to the southwest quadrant to parts of Route 20, they all play a role in Marlboro as a city, Marlboro's economy, Marlboro's housing, sort of housing position. We wanted to try to quantify for each of those places, like, what the actual value is and how you can either maintain that value or expand upon the value of that place over time. And that's sort of how we structured the strategies. One way we tried to identify places was Eric developed this model for RKG in-house, and it's called our urban form model, but for Marlboro we called it place types. And it looks at all the buildings in Marlboro, all the parcels of land in Marlboro, and all the streets in Marlboro. And it compares every single parcel and building to its nearest neighbors and other neighbors around the city. And then it groups them by, are the buildings similar in size and in height and in scale and in density? Are the roads of similar size and shape, lane width, do they have sidewalks, do they not? Are the parcels of similar size, et cetera? And the model essentially does machine learning, does what it does, goes in circles, and then comes out with a map that says these places are like other places. The reason we did this was people may not think that the area around Donald Lynch Boulevard is the same as the Southwest Quadrant, but sort of from a built environment perspective and an infrastructure perspective, they kind of function in the same way and they kind of have the same flavor. Same with your neighborhoods. Like, we have neighborhoods that are colored in a darker purple that are a little bit more intense in terms of their density or their housing types. And then you've got the more traditional kind of city suburb neighborhoods in pink that are a little bit more spread out, a little bit larger lots, a little bit bigger homes. So we thought by grouping them together, we could give you strategies that sort of direct you toward, well, if we're going to make a change in this kind of a place, what might the effect of that be across the city in these different places, not just neighborhood A, we're making this change. That change in neighborhood A might be appropriate in neighborhood B, C, and D. So as we start to think about the themes and some of the strategies, one for MEDC is really continuing the great work to target industries for Marlboro. So we provided some focus industries that I think align nicely with where you are today and where I think the Commonwealth wants to head in the future. So continuing to press upon professional, scientific, technical services, healthcare, publishing industries, which is really software publishing, so not books necessarily, but computer software. You have your computer electronic product manufacturing, which is big in the city. That's like your Raytheon and Hologic, continuing to build those. And then the one we added here, which I think it's a little bit outside the norm or the tradition, is recreational industries. You've got a lot of folks who are coming here like to play hockey, for example. Is there some way you can continue to build on Marlboro's sort of regional position and maybe add some things that would pair nicely with what you already have going on? The other one, the next one's just around reimagining those underperforming places. So here it's sort of identifying a pathway for redeveloping those buildings which may be obsolete today or which may be quickly becoming obsolete in the future. So thinking about potential zoning changes, barriers to permitting, if there are challenges for redevelopment, maybe revisiting the zoning restrictions and thinking about how you might want to make it a little bit easier if that's what you want to do in certain places. And then sort of maintaining the attractiveness of the commercial and industrial districts. So considering just making sure that that rezoning doesn't conflict with existing uses, and then encouraging mixed use where conditions support it. One area where we think it probably makes sense to take earlier action than later, just given the focus on the Southwest Quadrant. So we spent a little bit of time thinking a little more deeply about this part of the city, particularly the areas along Forest Street, William Street, and sort of Nickerson Road and Ames. And I think, Meredith, if you go to the next slide. So we took a look back at where the city kind of has those underperforming office and industrial assets, and they aligned with kind of these three areas that we have pointed out. The area we're calling east of 495, which is the sort of forestry area. I know there's some talk about development in that area. Then there's the Nickerson and Ames, where you've got several parcels that have those larger office buildings with parking lots on them and quite a bit of vacancy. And the interesting thing with that road is a lot of the parcels are owned by one or two property owners, so there might be an opportunity to actually work very closely with property owners to think about what is the re-envisioned future there. Then the other area is sort of next to the Apex Center, just to the right there along Route 20. One idea that we had was you already have some good and interesting overlay districts that allow a lot of different uses already. Could you potentially think about just expanding those overlay districts across 495 into the east of 495 or up into the Nickerson Ames if you thought that made sense? Those could be sort of quick hit changes that the city could consider that might unlock some potential in those areas without a ton of extra work. The other area was Donald Lynch Boulevard that we looked at. We know the mall is kind of in transition with new ownership. There's really good zoning in place there already. So I think it's just continuing to evaluate the effectiveness of that relatively new overlay district, talking with property owners, sort of seeing what comes out of that, and just making sure that that is aligned with the direction that property owners would ultimately want to take. Moving to downtown, I think there are some zoning changes that you could consider to lift what might be restrictions or at least perceived restrictions in the zoning, and continuing to sort of expand mixed-use development in the downtown core. I know you have some of that going on already and some more that's coming. You know, are there opportunities to transition some parcels and buildings in the downtown to kind of a higher and better use where tax production would be even better than it is today? Around expanding housing opportunities, we've got a lot of strategies in the report around this. Some of it is looking at increasing the housing supply in general, again, being strategic about where that might happen. Maybe some of that is in that Southwest Corridor area. But there are other places in the city, as I mentioned before, kind of in the peripheral neighborhoods of the Village Center District, where I think some zoning could potentially be loosened to open up opportunities on parcels for some of that kind of missing middle housing, and we have some suggestions for that in the report. This is just a map sort of illustrating where the city may want to begin to focus. It's kind of in those, again, those peripheral, what we have on the map, the sort of purple, more densely populated neighborhoods where you already have some of those housing typologies. The other one in housing is more focused on affordable housing, so deed-restricted affordable housing in this case. The city is currently above the 10% 40B threshold according to your subsidized housing inventory, but you're at 10.8. So you're just over, but you are over. Therefore, you're not subject to friendly or unfriendly 40B developments. But as you have new housing added to the city, just making sure that you're maintaining that percentage, and also just keeping an eye on any deed restricted units or 40B developments that you do have, and seeing if those deed restricted units are going to expire at any point. Because if those expire and revert back to market rate, that's going to bring your SHI number, your 40B number down. So again, just some suggestions on sort of monitoring short and long term. And then around guiding growth and evaluating capacity. So we did put together a whole fiscal impact model for the city, which we had shared with MEDC and the board, sort of looking at the revenue versus the costs of different types of new development that might come over time. And we also met with every department head and did interviews with them to talk about operational capacity as well as infrastructure and capital capacity. So we have some recommendations here around capacity. I would say overall, I think the city's doing a really good job. And what I learned from the department heads is there continues to be studying of infrastructure and the capacity, especially around things like water and sewer. I know there's a lot of questions there. I know the schools, you're sort of tackling that right now with the new elementary school. I know there's conversations ongoing about what to do about the fire station, and do we have something in the West District. So I know there's a lot of really good conversations going and a lot of good analysis by the department heads happening. So a lot of this is just recognizing that work and continuing to follow through on that. I won't spend too much time here, but if you looked at the report, we did sort of a comparison along Nickerson and Ames and the mall site, just what would happen if you shifted land use, or you allowed a different type of development to occur in these areas versus what there is today. So in this case, we said, what would happen if like multifamily development happened here at a size and scale to what's been approved more in the Green District area, and you kind of had more of that in the Southwest Quadrant up by the mall site. And just to show there could be a significant gain in assessed value and tax delta here to the tune of several millions of dollars. If that new growth was something that you were interested in, it could have a nice effect on revenue and not a huge effect on services. And lastly, I'll just leave you with more for MEDC, but also for the city. We had put together some sample evaluation measures that MEDC could track over time, just so that as you're moving forward with the forward plan, you are tracking things and making sure that the strategies that are being enacted are actually resulting in the kinds of positive change that you would want to see. And that's it. So,
All right.
no, I went fast, but happy to answer, of course, any questions.
All right, we'll see if there are any questions first. I'm going to now give the opportunity for the public to give comment. I didn't see a lot of people here, so I thought I might have to limit time. But if you would like to go around to the podium at the front for this one, so we can not have to turn around and look at you, please make sure that that mic is on, and that you give us your name and address, please.
Sure, it's Damon Michaels, 93 Chase Road. So I spent some time reading the report the other day. I spent some time reading it again today. It's very comprehensive. It's well done. Some of the comments I have are just minor little things. Other things are questions, and other ones are just kind of some feedback to what I believe a lot of people are saying, at least online, and the few people that I talk to offline. So take them for what they're worth. It's no big deal if things don't change. And one of the questions I had was, do you somehow account for people like me who work from home? I know there's a whole bunch of me's out there that work from home, and a lot of it is in the software industry. Do you ever capture numbers from people like me?
Do you want to go ahead and answer?
I'm happy to. I didn't want to step on toes. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The census has numbers that are a little bit lagged, but they do talk about folks who work from home.
Yeah, well, I've been working from home since 2006, so I'm not new to it. One thing, another thing is very minor. Raytheon doesn't exist anymore. It's RTX. It's not even a company anymore. We all know that Solomon Pond Mall has been dying for a few years. It's definitely not a destination anymore. But I think, you know, you're right. You could be, again, you know, with the right use cases in that area. I mean, that whole strip along Donald Lynch there is just ideal for it. You don't have many homes in that area. You're not going to run into a lot of opposition from people to like reuse that kind of area, you know, and I think it's really primed for it. I mean, there's a lot of what appears to be empty space where DCU used to be, for example. So though it's not currently a destination, I think it could be again. We got that 290 exit right there. It's a large capacity, so. I also wanted to mention that there are multiple RK businesses in town, not just the one that you called RK Center. And I think maybe the one on Descenso Boulevard at Route 20, maybe I think RK owns that as well. Right, RK owns that, and RK owns where they're putting the McDonald's in and stuff like that, right?
Eventually McDonald's is gonna buy it.
What?
Eventually McDonald's buys the building.
Yes. That's the way they do all their, all of their properties. They own their stuff. I also have page numbers if anybody's interested in finding out the page number. Something that you probably want to add on page 9 is Apex isn't listed there. Apex is pretty big. It's a huge attractor in my area. I live right across there. I see the huge volume of cars going in and out every day. This is a question. So you had Raising Cane's at 1 million visits. Now, I know there's lots of Caniacs, and I'm really well aware of how many people like Cane's, but it seemed to me 1 million non-unique visitors was huge number. And I was just wondering, and that's on page 12, wondering, where do you get that data from? Because I went out hunting for the data today, and probably unless I pay for it, I couldn't find the data. Sure. So I don't know, does it come from Raising Cane's? It comes from some other source?
Yeah, it comes from a, and that million may not, it's sort of an estimate, but it's as close as they can get. It's a source called Placer AI, and they use cell phone apps to track.
What's the name of the company?
Placer AI.
Oh, Placer, okay, got it, yeah, they do the cell phone tracking.
Yep, so they cell phone track, and that's how we get the
I bring that up because I posted today on one of my Facebook groups, and people were kind of shocked by the number and couldn't believe the number. So I want, but however, living in the area, I saw the huge burst of activity, especially at the beginning. Also like to point out, recently been doing trash collection. So it's great that we have new restaurants and stuff in town, and you can't control what your customers do. I understand that. But they were the #1 trash by volume on Boundary Street this year, and I've been collecting trash there since 1997. So you could see that in fact, there are a lot of people doing it for them to become suddenly the #1 trash by volume, at least on one street. My daughter suggests that it's probably teenagers who are being jerks. So, on page 12, it listed off, I think, a Shell gas station. I'd have to look, about 600,000 visits. I wasn't sure which Shell gas station that was exactly. This is more feedback for the city councilors, which I'm sure you've heard numerous times. So people here generally seem to have gravitated now towards that they don't want 1 billion huge apartment buildings being built here anymore. That they're kind of tired of it, especially with the explosion of ones that we've had in the community. You could just see it online. I've heard it offline too. It's on page 17. The other day when I was here, they were talking about mixed use, and one of the developers was here, and they were talking about having, they want people to stay in that area, so where the mixed use is. And to me, that doesn't really help the rest of Marlborough. If you're having everybody stay in one area, yeah, I'm sure they'll come out and stuff like that. But the fact that the developer wants them to and says that they want them to probably is not the best thing for, one, a developer to say, and two, for us to accept, because we really do want them to come downtown here, and we do really want them to go to some other businesses. And I'm sure that they will, but the fact that developers pointing that out as something great to keep there, to me, that's not great. I also really liked on page 30 the GIS data that you pulled out. So that's one of the things I do at my company. I looked at it a little bit more closely, compared it to actual GIS images, And I'm doubting the accuracy of it. I'm saying maybe 75 to 90% accurate, and here's why. I'll give you one example that I was able to very easily find. The city sewer water facilities on Boundary Street on the west side were considered suburban residential, and I can assure you that those are definitely not suburban residential. There's probably other stuff that's going on there, but I think by and large, it's a pretty accurate map of what's going on. But just so you're aware that, within 10 seconds, I found a hole just because of my local knowledge. And I'm sure you could probably find other holes. So probably keep refining that model. For example, my area was touted as being transitional. Well, I can assure you it's not very transitional. We're locked in a neighborhood that, although our neighborhood has, and I looked up how you guys define transitional, my neighborhood has, yes, sidewalks on both sides. But in order to, and the neighborhood next to me also has sidewalks on both sides, but we share common streets. And these common streets don't have any sidewalks and are very dangerous to walk on, and I would advise nobody to ever walk on. At the same time, the residents on those streets with no sidewalks don't want sidewalks. So I don't know how you solve that issue, but my neighborhood, Chase Road area, is not transitional. We're trapped in there. We're trapped by Millhand. Other people are trapped by Elm Street and different other areas. So there's probably some more modeling that could be done in those areas. Maybe a finer grain definition, be like, hey, this neighborhood is transitional, but they can't move out of their area. It's only within this little spot and this little spot and this little spot, and there's no way for us to come out. That's something that I saw just in my area. I don't know how many other areas are like that, but I think it's a really, really handy tool. Some feedback for city councilors. I'm sure you've heard this before. Page 41, probably not a good idea to change the height, the stories in downtown, and not reduce the parking requirements. We all heard what happened with the buildings that went down here. A lot of talk online about heights of buildings, number of stories, and parking. So I would advise, do not, under any circumstances, reduce the parking. I don't know if what was put in on page 41 is a reduction or an increase. I'm just saying don't reduce it. Now again, back to my neighborhood on page 43, where you talk about transitional neighborhoods and putting things on the edge of them. I picked my area because I don't like dense housing, so I wouldn't be a big fan of dense housing moving into my area. Things like you discussed before about townhouses, condos, those are a little more palatable, but anything bigger than that, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of feedback from residents who really would not like the concept of anything bigger than that. I mean, I moved into my area for how it is now, and I don't want to see big, huge things built up around me. Really don't. And on page 45, this was interesting. Why was there a discussion about taxing a multifamily as commercial and not residential? I didn't really understand why that line was thrown in there. That could be fairly controversial to people who own multifamily homes. I just don't understand that part, and I think it would be good to get clarification on that part at some point. It would seem like a really big transition to change a multifamily that was a residential to suddenly being commercial. Probably not going to be very well received. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Michaels. Did anybody else in the room have any questions, comments, suggestions on the plan?
Yes.
Would you like to go up to the microphone again, introduce yourself, give us your address, please?
My name is Stephen Vigneault, and I live at 47 Reynolds Court here in town. I was a work from home from 2014 to 2019. Now I'm a retired from home, which works out even better. Some general comments. I'm thrilled that there is a plan afoot, because it has certainly seemed, as a relatively new 10 years-ish resident, I couldn't find a plan. Nothing made sense to me. There are just overly large buildings being jammed onto lots, and I'm contrasting our downtown and how it's changing with the downtown right nearby in Hudson. And they aren't burdening their downtown with these large buildings and pretending that one parking spot per housing unit is going to be sufficient, because in America, that's science fiction. There was also this enormous proposal for a development on Robin Hill Road, and I think that was around 300 units that appeared, and there were hearings I didn't get to attend because I was traveling for business. It seems to have vanished. I tried to find out what the status is, and it's not easy to find things on our website. I have a particular comment on page 46, which is, it's the one that was right towards the end, and it showed a proposal for making use of the slowly dying Solomon Pond Mall and some of the other things on, I almost said Daniel Webster, Donald Lynch Boulevard. As somebody who would be significantly affected by that, probably, although we're on the other side of 290, I still think it's a great idea. You know, to make use of that property, especially for rationally sized places. There's an enormous amount of space. I mean, the parking at Solomon Pond is gigantic. You could put apartment buildings in there, turn Sears into something that could be useful again. That would be great. But I'm perplexed about the math on page 47. It says, 46. It says that there are, it said it is capable of 444 housing units. I wasn't completely clear as to whether each one of those is a multi-unit dwelling or those are each one is a family unit, a single place to live in. But the math threw me. It says that the number of people with 444 housing units, that says that that will provide 31 additional students. I can't make that math. I looked at, and if I'm reading something wrong and my engineering degree has completely fallen out of my head and I can't do arithmetic anymore, please forgive and correct me. Right now, the city has data pulled off. Well, first off, one of the things, there was a note on that slide that said, based on our analysis, the recently built multi-unit dwellings produce 0.07 students per unit. That doesn't fit with the rest of the city, number one. Number two, those kind of housing units generally draw younger couples. And the one thing I know about younger couples is they tend to produce children. The ones that I know certainly are. We're grateful to one of our sons for giving us grandchildren. And he's not at the 0.07 number. If you look at the numbers now, we have roughly 17,000 housing units. All this is all derived. I have the primary source material for this. I was surprised that there was no primary source referred to, just a number that says 0.7. It's like, what's the believability of that? Well, with no reference data that's got zero believability, zero support to it. We have 17,000 units, roughly. We have 4,750 K through 12 students, according to the data that I found. And you take 4,750 students, divide it by 17,000 housing units, and each housing unit has 0.2794 students, roughly 0.3 students. If you put 444 housing units in there at 0.3, that's not 31 students. The number is a whole lot higher than that. It's about 7 times that number. If you take the Nickerson area, which can handle supposedly 1,122 housing units, and you have it be the actual number, it's not 78 students, which is what the plan says. So unless these housing units are all 55 and above, who produce very few children, or you're providing birth control with every apartment and it's mandatory, these numbers don't fly. And I think that is, when I find, and again, correct me if I've missed something. I've missed many things over my years.
Steve, I won't correct you, but I will sort of stop you, and I don't know if they want to comment, but I believe the numbers that they used are the same numbers that were put into information from the campus that come from the superintendent of schools, who gave us the numbers when we were asking how many students are actually in the new developments that we have approved that now are full, getting full, even the brand-new ones. And those are the numbers that are the real counts of students coming from those apartment complexes, that they're
I wish
projecting.
there should have been a
forward.
reference to that in the document to substantiate where the number came from, because it seemed like there's a good number, I'll go with that one, because I can jam more housing units in if I can tell the nice people that they won't have to build another school. So I appreciate being illuminated on that. However, I will counter by saying, going back to the point that I made earlier, condos and apartment buildings tend to draw in younger couples. I would be shocked if that 0.07 per unit number is true 5 years from now. And if you look at the housing stock in the city right now, you take the number of students, you divide it by the number of housing units, you get a number that is 7 times larger than the math that was used. And I'm not looking for a resolution to this. I'm saying the numbers don't work. And they can either provide primary data to indicate that in other similar municipalities, they built a bunch of large apartment buildings, and in 2 years after they were opened up, they were producing 0.07 students per unit, and now, 20 years later, they still are. I'm certain that data is not out there. I think it's totally different data to it. My only concern that I'm raising is the number just doesn't make sense without substantiating data and forward-looking data.
And the forward-looking data is hard to come up with. I mean, we can look at the apartment complexes that were built in the 1980s and know that they are full of children. Will the apartments built today at probably twice the rent of those apartments in 20 years be full of children? Who knows? They may be.
The
They
past
may
is
also
generally
remain-
prologue to the future. And if the city is going to plan based on a set of numbers and put in a plan that goes out 10, 15, and 20 years, there should be reasonable predictions and forecasts based on some sort of factual data. And you just articulated some factual data from apartment buildings that were built in the not overly distant past, and that's not a 0.07 students per housing unit. So all I'm trying to get at is we need to have the numbers explained and have it explained to us why those numbers are the numbers that we should be thinking about in approving a plan that, from very simple arithmetic, is going to require us to build enough classrooms to hold another 500 students if we were to build the Nickerson and the Solomon Pond Law properties. I'm not opposed to building them. I just want us to be planning for it so that when we look at the tax revenue coming in and all the rest of that stuff, that's right. What are the costs that go with it? One last comment. One of the comments that was made in the report was about roads. You ought to drive around on some of our roads. We have a lot to apologize for, and it is not getting better. I've corresponded with the mayor's office, received basically a form letter emailed back, and they still have done virtually nothing except slap a bit of pancake batter on Bigelow and Elm and wished us Godspeed and hope we'd stop calling. We have serious road problems, and sometimes you just have to face that. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Your road comment is certainly appreciated, and I think all of us that live in Marlboro agree with you. However, I drive all over this area, and maybe not the whole state, but it's just as bad everywhere else. So it's an issue.
Our plan to fix it.
We're
If I'm
taking,
running a business, I have to have a 3, 5, and 10-year plan.
and we have one, and the mayor is working on the forward plan for, I know a lot of the roads won't get fixed, but there's a plan to do maintenance.
So Madam
Is there.
Madam Chair,
And
so hang
and
on,
I-
hang on. One, Steve, you're not next to a microphone, so no one can hear you, okay?
sorry, and this is not the discussion time for transportation. We can have that when the mayor brings down plans, but I know that the roads are an issue that we talk about as a council offline all the time. We get the emails, we drive the roads, we totally understand that.
Understanding and fixing are regrettably very much apart in the city right now.
All the,
The city could, at a minimum, publish on our disjointed website a list of what roads are going to be fixed in what order.
I believe that's there, but again, this is not the time to have that discussion. So thank you very much for your comments that are there. I know specifically with the students, I think demographically across the country and in Marlboro, less families are having children. The city of Marlboro is losing children. So there may be a reason why, specifically around federal issues. It may just be that we're losing children because they're not here. That's an argument we could have at another time. And I think that the issue of what we've built, what's being brought to us to be built, is a discussion that each of us as counselors needs to, and have had the discussion of how many children will it actually bring. It's a guess. So.
Can I just comment on one other comment about that there's no good place to find information on developments that are being proposed? We've actually done a lot of work over the past couple of years of aggregating that data. In any active proposal that's in front of the city council, there is we call it the developer's communication page on the city website that you can go and find any active special permit application that's before this council. And happy to follow up with you to send you a link. It's on the city's website.
What do I search for to find it?
I can give you my card before we leave, and I'm happy to email you a direct link.
It's on the city council page, but how, it does not talk about projects that have been withdrawn, which is the case of the Robin Hill project.
Just active projects. So you are correct. You can't find it anywhere because it is not before the council right now. So, but you can find information with summaries and all the correct information about any active project that's before the council.
Does it at least indicate that, for example, that the Robin Hill project was withdrawn?
No. It's only
Useful information.
it's only active projects that are before the city council.
I think if you would call anybody who's looking for a status of a project that they'd heard about, that they're not sure where it is, the city council staff can tell you where it is. A city councilor could tell you, I have a list of all the projects for multiple years and know whether they've been withdrawn, whether we denied them, whether they were approved. So the status is there. All right, I'm going to, I did not read the mayor's letter. I had that sort of buried here. I don't know technically how important it is. You all got it in the original packet. So what I will give you is the email that I received from Becky Salemi on Blazewood Avenue, 32 Blazewood Avenue. She was very outspoken, that's the word I want, when the Boston Scientific Project was before us, another one that was withdrawn. So her comments were really about the fact that the open space and recreation plan that was recently adopted does not seem to mesh with the forward plan. the forward plan, or the open space and recreation had qualitative values on page 29, where the plan included the summary of achievements for the open space plan, an overview of the city's cultural history, an inventory of the community's natural resources, an inventory of lands and conservation, an analysis of conservation and recreation needs within the city, and a list of goals and objectives. I pasted this here to emphasize the importance of the open space plan and wonder why it was not mentioned in the Marlboro Forward Plan in any comprehensive way. Is there a way that these two critical and well-developed plans can work together to truly position our city in the best possible stance for the future? So I guess I would agree they are two separate documents that would probably have to work together. And I don't know if there's a way to mesh them or keep them as separate, or if you have.
I mean, I would assume that Priscilla spoke about the open space plan. We can certainly share it with you guys, but yeah, I mean, they spoke
We
directly
interviewed
with the department heads about those types of things.
Okay. And then I just want to kind of begin for people who do not know, because I guess I feel a little like one of the speakers that said, they don't think we've got a plan. So for me, the fact that I was actually on the city council in 2013 when the master plan was approved, the first draft, but I have never looked at that over almost 900-page document, or even the 90-page synopsis, as we have either rezoned or we have had projects come before us. So it's a document that we adopted. We adopted a preamble that says a lot of nice stuff, but I don't think it's been a working document for us. So my hope is that if, in fact, this new forward plan does get adopted, that it becomes more of a tool that we really do use. And I don't know if there are things in it that we need to clear up, things that we need to decide if we agree with as a council. A couple of points were brought up by our speakers that I think need to be clarified. So I know back in, people talk about it, 1985, there was the original master plan. It was presented by then Mayor Kusan Haddad. And I do want to read where it stated that the challenge for all citizens of Marlboro is to understand our city and the economic, demographic, political, and other related forces at work so that we can direct growth and redevelopment in a beneficial pattern, as well as cope with the related impacts of that growth. That's why the master plan was presented to the city council. I think those are still true today. But he further stated, the plan is not a specific solution that will automatically solve our problems. The strongest and most valuable part of the plan is the statement of goals. These adopted goals represent our shared beliefs and values. So the master plan had multiple goals that, if you look at them today, people would argue that most of them were done, some of them were not done. Some of them that were in there were to continue with the planner and to continue updating that master plan, which obviously never happened. It went from 1985 to 2011 at the urging of MEDC to come up with something to help guide us. So there does seem to be a desire to have something that we can look at as we get projects before us. My concern with some of it, especially with the southwest quadrant, is that things are before us now. And so it's hard to figure out where to go. And somewhere in here it was fun going back. I know I tossed tons and tons of stuff, but I have Marlboro Southwest Quadrant Analysis from 2015, done by MAPC, which kind of says the same thing that we're talking about now. That's where our growth should be happening. So it's nice to know that that's still a consistent idea.
Madam Chair, can I just our entire goals and objectives of our organization are based on that master plan. So it was the economic development master plan. So I just want to
Right,
make
but
sure
the
that
city
it's known that-
council, as a council, did take, I mean, I didn't watch all of it. It was referred to, interestingly enough, Operations and Oversight, thank you, Owen, Operations and Oversight, but they did adopt the plan as the city's council's master plan, but it sat on a shelf and never was really used. You used it as a organization to bring growth to the city. We didn't use it as a zoning special permit authority body to say, hey, look, this is what we said we were going to do. Are we following that, or are we not following it? And yes, counselors have changed since 2013, and definitely since 1985, but I don't know that we did it due diligence or due justice. Councilor Ossing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll just disagree a little bit. So the 2010 master plan was set up, 2011 or 2013, whenever it got approved, as the roadmap to basically, and I'm going to quote, to improve economic opportunities for Marlboro residents and businesses, leading to stabilizing the tax rate. All right? And if you go through the 900 pages, which we have a couple of, I call it abbreviated versions, and look at some of the shortened recommendations, we did pretty good. What the intent wasn't for every development to come before the city to say, where does it fit, fit in this master plan? It doesn't work. No one has that crystal ball. And if you do, you're in the wrong business, because you should be making a lot of money somewhere else. All right? The whole intent of setting up MEDC was to stabilize the tax base and bring economic development to increase commercial assessed values to ultimately keep our tax base stable. And for the last 15 years, except for last year, and that discussion will take place next week when we get the budget, we've kept the average single-family house tax bill under $200 for 15 years in a row. We have increased the economic value of the city of Marlboro by over $833 million from 2011 to today because of the work this group does. If you ask any planner or any other municipality, they want what we have. All right? Now, you can argue you don't like the roads, or you think there's too many buildings. Okay, but no one tells me, says, cut teachers, cut firefighters, cut policemen. It's, don't build, don't bring new growth in. Well, it doesn't work that way, ladies and gentlemen. You need new growth to provide the services. $10 million a year, the budget's going to be going up. I don't have new growth to offset it, and state aid is not coming. We are getting Zippo increase from last year in state aid. All right? So the alternative is local revenue, so that's excise tax, water bills, sewer bills. Well, we're not going to go jack up all those rates, so it falls on the property owner. And for those that say, I want to change, and this is where I'll disagree with the forward plan, changing the commercial or multifamily to a commercial database will cripple the people paying rent. All right? So to me, that's a non-starter. It's being talked about in Boston, and I get it, all right, because they're all looking for ways to get revenue. But I wouldn't be supporting it, because that is going to cripple the people that pay the rent. Because what do you think? The commercial bill guy's going to go pay another $3 million in taxes and not pass that cost on to somebody? Anybody want to take a guess where that cost is going to get passed down to? The people that pay the rent. Right? So that's a non-starter. So the forward plan had input from all our department heads, had input from the executive committee board, and we're looking for feedback from this board. If you're looking for that prescriptive, build here, build there, so why build in the southwest quadrant that they knew in 2015, that they knew in 2010, that they knew in 1985? It's the only place we have space. So where do you think we're gonna build? If you don't think that's the case, you're not paying attention. I can't go build it down on Chase Road. They're kind of a little tight right down there right now, all right? Yep. So this isn't a surprise. So the question in my mind becomes, what's the rational approach to build at a rate that the city can sustain, both budget-wise and the proverbial, I don't want too much building? Well, if you don't want any building, that's okay, but I want you to follow it up with, I'm going to be willing to pay a boatload in taxes. And I have yet to hear that comment.
Right, and
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think that is where we wind up as 11 individual counselors with our decision on voting yes or no on projects, and so that's our dilemma. I'm going to go to Councilor Nabin. I saw his hand, and I'll get you, Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here tonight. Thanks for this work. This is, it's a great document. I really enjoyed reading through it. I enjoyed you guys walking through it in your presentation and kind of mirroring the report, because it does make it a little bit easier to understand. Just in response to, I think, the President's comments and Councilor Robin, the Chair's comments, for me, this presents, I don't have a problem kind of squaring the circle, as it were, for having this document, approving this document, and, adopting this document. For me, it's a menu of possibilities for the things that we could be doing. I think, as the President just highlighted, one of the areas that I think most of us would disagree with is switching to a commercial tax rate for the multifamilies. But it's always good to have one lightning rod in there to make sure, you kind of toss that out, and then, everything else is great. As someone who used to own a multifamily property, I think I think we would argue that some of the 2 and 3 families have undergone some significant tax rate raises over the past several years. But that said, these are all good options. This is, if you were to go in to, make these recommendations and someone said, hey, I need more revenue, I need to find other ways to do this, this is what you would do. And so for me, this is great. Do I agree with all these things? No, absolutely not. Do I agree with some of them? Yes. Do I both agree and disagree with some of them? Yes, I do. But I think it's really helpful. And so I really appreciate the work that you've done, and I find it really interesting. My first question, Meredith, for you is, after this goes forward, after this finishes this phase for you guys, what's the plan to publicize this and share this with the community, both our residents and kind of the business community at large?
I think that's a work in progress. I think this is our first, introduction to the community. I don't even know that the master plan back in 2011 had more than council, but we certainly could take it on a roadshow. It's not in final form. It's still in draft form. If we wanted to get it in front of Rotary clubs and the Chamber of Commerce, for the business community, some resident neighborhood input, we're happy to do whatever you guys want us to do. We're happy to do that.
I think it's very important for the conversation that we keep having here, for the conversation that the residents who have come here tonight to talk about highlights both our strengths as a community, both from our infrastructure and from our community and the people who make up our community and the businesses that make up our community. And it kind of highlights our strengths and our challenges, but at the same time, how we do grow and how sometimes we have to recognize that those are often in contrast to one another, and how do we kind of move forward. And I think people really kind of taking a pride in the fact that we do have great restaurants, we do have all these different quadrants, it's something to be proud of, but then it also kind of says, okay, well, where do we kind of prioritize that growth? So I think from the residential side, I think it would be helpful, even if it's, like you said, Rotary clubs, get down to, it's not hard for you guys to get to a local channel, local cable access taping, I don't think so. Right. Be able to do something like that. Great podcast opportunity for you guys. I love the pod.
Do you want to be a guest?
No. You had to suffer through that once. That's enough for you. So I do appreciate that. This is going to be a little bit biased, but you talked a little bit about water and sewer access and how it's a benefit structurally for us. It's a benefit for people who are coming in. Was it identified by others outside as a reason to locate? Did you have any data? Did you guys find anything about that? Or is it just basically, your knowledge and understanding and your experience knowing that access to clean, reliable, and abundant water and wastewater sewer services is
I would say
helpful.
the latter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. You highlighted potential quick hits for zoning changes to unlock additional development. You talked about the parcel west of Apex and then kind of taking that a little bit further across 495. When you say rezoning for those parcels, do you mean for multifamily residential development, or do you mean are there other things that could be potentially for those areas?
Yeah, it was, so the parcel that is just to the, I guess, to the east of Apex, that we had identified, I think in the purple area.
Yep.
I think the idea was to take the overlay district that I think allowed Apex to come in and do the unique mix of uses that it has and just sort of mirror that on the other side and see what that could open up on the frontage of Route 20. For the Forestry area and then maybe eventually the Nickerson Ames area would be taking it's like the RMOUD
Yep.
Overlay district
Yep.
there, which is more residential mixed use, I think,
Yep.
and flipping that to the other side of 495 and, you know, maybe, I mean, there's a lot of discussion amongst the MEDC board about, like, which ones would you do first? Would you wait on Nickerson? Because that is a larger area. It is all owned by, primarily by one property owner, but there is a mix of them and another. So if you were to rezone that, you'd want to do it thoughtfully and probably in partnership with them, and maybe it's a phased approach thing, but the other two, you know, you've got, over on Forestry, I think you've got a project in front of you, and then the other one just seems like maybe a potential short-term opportunity.
Councilor Neiman, we struggled a lot in our conversations of, okay, so the office market's tough today.
Yeah.
We don't want to give away the farm, and in 15 years from now, the office market comes back and now it's all residential. So we struggled a lot with that of how do you realize higher values today without giving away future value.
Yeah, absolutely.
For 20 years from now.
I think you're reading my notes.
I
so that's
think
good.
that was a question that got asked on the forest public hearing
And so,
and was brought
and so
up.
when you have that particular question about where do we target the office space, is it the Class B office space? Is your older stock that you're like, okay, we can probably move on because we have had no bites at this in the region for quite some time?
That's exactly the analysis we tried to do and highlight to the board, to MEDC, was there's a lot of acreage in that Southwest. So it's not like by making, I call them small changes, I'm not trying to minimize the change, but smaller areas compared to the overall acreage, you still have a lot of commercial industrial land that I would recommend you hold on to.
Right.
And, you know, if there's vacancy over time, like hang on to it, you know, and hopefully things will cycle back around again. But there's definitely some of those distressed properties, I think, where vacancy is really high, where if you did make that change and a developer went in, you could realize new growth revenue to the city.
You hit a little bit on it when you talked about kind of a phased approach and how you kind of look at some of these different zoning changes. One of the things I struggle with is when we're trying to find new projects and we want to have this new growth and we look at it and there are some great projects before us, but they are in a pool of what I would call, you know, different projects that may not be as great. And you have that kind of, that choice that you have to make between, I'm gonna only pick and choose, and then maybe the ones, I only picked and chose the best ones, and maybe they don't get built, and the other ones would have, right? And so that's always, and we've heard from developers that, you know, the market will kind of help solve some of those issues, but do you kind of have recommendations on, you know, is there a prime, have you seen in your work, is there a target number that you want to then come online that both will support the market, but then also not overburden kind of the coming online, both from an infrastructure point and from the rental market point? Like, is there a kind of a target in a community of our size that you would think will support that new growth consistently and in a sustainable manner?
I don't know if I've seen a target per se. I guess what I would say, and I don't know if this answers your question or helps you reconcile with this, but if I'm a private developer and I buy a piece of land and the city grants me the opportunity to bring on, you know, let's say it's a huge project, it's 600 units, I'm just making up a number. I think they're unlikely to put 600 units all in one tranche. They'll probably phase it
Right.
because they know the market absorption is we'll put 150 or 200 units on. We have a sense from looking at historical market absorption data and maybe other developments they have in the region or in the state, where they know that 200 units is going to take a year to lease up. Then they might come back and do the next one. So I think it would be unlikely that it would all get put on the market at once and sort of, you know, because that's not good for them either.
Right.
It's not good for their investors. It's not good for you all, right? If you got high vacancy, they've got to start offering concessions. I mean, none of that is really good. So I would hope that they are savvy enough, I'm sure most of them are, to sort of phase something like that in. But if you're talking about a project of, you know, 200 units here, then maybe another one over here, I mean, I think it will get absorbed just based on how things have been going, even the last 10 years.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. This touches just quickly on the target growth, the short term. I see you guys have some homework in here as well. So some of the target growth industries, obviously, biotech has seen a stunning stall in the market. I'm sure you guys already saw this, but I just saw, looks like Mass Bio was just touting the fact that Governor Healy signed an agreement with the Spain's VC fund, excuse me, to support Massachusetts biotech.
At that
So-
event. It was
okay.
very exciting.
So great. I just wanted to
Right
flag
there,
that. That's, yep. I'm going to brush up on my Spanish and see if we can bring some of those folks. And then the last piece, I just wanted to touch on the student one. I think everybody, as we were kind of going back and forth on the student piece, I try to make this argument a lot. Both things can be true. The apartments of today, and Katie, you kind of hit on it. Excuse me, Madam Chair, you kind of hit on it. These new apartment buildings are not a problem for our school system today. They may be in the future. And those, at some point, these are not going to be the new fancy apartments. Someday, a golf simulator and a bar may not be the hot new thing. I don't know why. I can't imagine a time in my life where that would not ever be appealing, but it's possible. And so those may not be those apartment buildings, right? Royal Crest, when I was a kid, when apparently Mayor Haddad was in office, I just learned that today, in 1985, right? Like Royal Crest was the newer apartment, and there were some kids at school that lived there, but not like they are today. And so, we could be building, this is going to sound a little bit too far, but we could be building a ticking time bomb with some of this housing all coming online. And so they can both be true, right? Councilor Frachilli, you've noted these numbers a lot. They are not big numbers currently here. I don't know how they could be with a one bedroom at $3,000 a month, but at some point, as these get older, the companies who own them sell them, rents will come down, or the market will go and surpass them. So I think both things can be true, and we should be thoughtful as we're doing it. And I have taken up way too much time. So again, I thank you all for your thoughtfulness and your work. Meredith, continue to just crush it. Thank you.
And I'll just throw out, I believe in downtown Marlboro, we did put a limit on how many units we could do in a year. We have also, the original Results Way mixed use was a 100 units, and then they came back and asked for that to be revised, and we did special permit for the second part. The Green District has been phased, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Hopefully they'll come back for, so we have done phasing. The problem becomes the one where one is here and one is there, and they're both 300 units. Do we say, well, I like this one, but I don't like that one? And we have rezoned Donald Lynch Boulevard. Well before Donald Lynch, we rezoned 20 East. Nothing. Again, nothing has happened on 20 East. We hoped that by rezoning to allow for mixed use, that would actually become a place where we could see apartment buildings with the mixed use with stores, and it's not happened. So, Councilor Doucette.
Thank you much, Madam Chair. And thank you, folks, for doing the presentation, and a lot of work was put into this. Just in summaries, I hope the next time we don't have to wait, how many years? 20,
12?
10, 15 years? Like to see something here like every 5 years, what's going on as far as reporting the capabilities. That's just my opinion for that, because I think that's important. As far as the size of the presentation itself, I think is fine. A 900-page doc, which used to be the normal things back in the 80s or something, we realized that, even with TikTok, they're trying to get in videos in under how many minutes, right? But a couple of things, and I don't necessarily want to get into some details, but as far as downtown goes, you know, we're talking about making it walk accessible, right? So the problem that we have in downtown Marlboro is that the current bike trail ends in downtown Marlboro, and bike trails should never end. They need to continue someplace else for transition and stuff. Like, I got on a bike, I got on the trail in Marlboro, I got through Marlboro, through Hudson, into Sudbury, and came back, right? But I went through the town on the trail. Right now, the trail ends here. And if you want to talk about walkability and stuff like that, we have to talk about what are the paths to get to downtown that do not involve that trail. Because people will come from the trail and other paths and vice versa. You know, and if we can get something to go south to the train station as an official path, I know there's an informal one that you were working on, but I think that's, to formalize that, to say, hey, there's a trail that you can take to go from downtown Marlboro to the train station in Southborough, that would be huge for bikers and other types of, you know, foot traffic activity type stuff, because I'm seeing overall a lot of people just getting onto the trails. Like, you know, I've been doing it for a couple of years, but now that the Mass Central's been paved, the place is extremely busy in a good way. But I think we need to somehow pull that traffic into here, because there's lots of opportunity with foot traffic and stuff. But, you know, when you're trying to get out of downtown, it's tough to get, you know, reasonably far out of the neighborhood. You know, you don't want to stay on 20, you got to figure out the back roads. People who know the back roads do it, but we need to make it more formal. I think some of the other things, on page 7, your review of the different businesses didn't include retail, and it would be important to actually include retail, because there's a lot of retail businesses in Marlboro, okay? You know, as far as office, you know, the office buildings is the issue. You know, we do have 2 tax rates. I think putting, you know, any type of housing into the commercial tax rate is suicide. No way I'm gonna vote for that, you know. But on the other hand, I don't also want to see these commercial properties getting converted to housing, because that also reduces the rate long-term. So, you know, again, the question is basically, how, you know, what are the businesses that we can attract to the city that can take the benefits based upon location, proximity, and everything else? So, you know, we're cheaper than Worcester, we're cheaper than Boston, but you can get to both easily. I think that's an important part. And I think you brought it up once before, and I think it's going to be emphasized. You know, basically low-income, owner-occupied housing, you know, entry-level housing. I mean, we had a conversation with one of the developers, and they're like, oh, I want to do apartments. It's like, you know, we have plenty of apartments coming online. We don't have any owner-occupied housing. That's the real shortage, even if it's condominiums or anything else. We need to get that type of housing into the city, because I think the, you know, houses with lots, you know, those become expensive McMansions, but either townhouses or garden-style condos, you know, single-floor living, I think that's important to be addressed going forward as part of economic development. But, you know, I think it's also important to get different industries to come into Marlboro, because I think one of the biggest problems that we had faced in the past is that we were relying on 1 or 2 businesses. You know, Digital Equipment Corporation had 23 buildings. Fidelity came in, bought out DEC, then moved to Rhode Island, left us in a lurch, which is why you guys were developed. You know, really, economic development came out of that. You know, so I think that Marlboro Economic Development Corporation has been an incredibly valuable asset to the community, and I enjoy what you guys do. I think the first phases of development that were done over the last 10 years, there were a lot of hotels that were thrown into the development. A lot of the reasons was to support the New England Sports Center and other activities for recreation and kind of building up a recreation industry within our community, and it worked. But how do we take that same model and possibly identify other potential industries to grow, nurture, and expand within this area? So, because, you know, the hotels help fund you guys going forward too, so you benefited with that growth. But I think we have enough hotels now, but how do we get other industries to come in here and identify the opportunities of having Marlboro at home? So, that's about it, thank you.
Other counselors with questions, comments on the plan? Counselor Preciado.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you guys for being here. So I had just a couple questions, or a few questions. With this plan, is there consideration for like the infrastructure to build out these industries or build out these proposed, like, you know, the Southwest Quadrant and also expanding the economic development in other areas? Are we prepared for like the influx of that population to be moving in? Is the city, because this plan does not address any of that, right? It just addresses like just solely economic development, but not really like the bare bones, the backbone of supporting that.
So we did two things around services and infrastructure. I think that's what your question's getting at, like city-provided infrastructure and services. So as I mentioned before, we did an initial round of interviews with all the department heads to try to identify what's going well, but then more importantly, what stressors do they have within their department, either personnel, capital, vehicles, infrastructure, whatever it is. So we took that into consideration as we were starting to think about areas of the city where you may want to encourage investment over time. Once we had sort of settled on, you know, like Donald Lynch and the downtown area and certainly the Southwest Quadrant, and we had started to develop, like, at least for a couple of those areas, some of those preliminary housing counts that were in the report for like Donald Lynch and like the Nickerson area, we circled back with the school district superintendent, as well as DPW and engineering, to double check with them and sort of give them like a hypothetical. What if, I think we said like 15 or 1,600 units came online in the next 5 to 10 years. Would that stress the system? So we did circle back with them and double check. And I think by and large with the new elementary school that, you know, is I think coming online in the next couple of years, that's going to have expanded capacity. And then when we talked about like water and sewer capacity, for example, there's a couple of studies that are going on, and DPW and engineering continues to work on like infiltration issues into the sewer system from stormwater runoff during heavy events and things like that, which if those are addressed over time and a couple of small tweaks to the system that they had identified, they thought that there was the capacity to be able to serve.
Okay, that is good to know. I know that we had some issues with wastewater, you know, a few years ago before we had the updates, and so that is good to know. In the sense of, you know, alternative transportation, as my council member here had mentioned, bike paths, I think it would be imperative to be able to connect these new areas of growth, right, with alternative transportation methods, either whether that includes public transit with buses or shuttles or bike paths or what have you. Is that something that we should also be investing in right now? And I know there's not really like a set plan for any of this right now, but having that set in place would definitely, I think, help promote these areas.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I would say when it comes to sidewalks and bike infrastructure, those are things that the city could, you know, you've been doing it and you could continue to do it and think, you know, maybe more holistically about where those connections could happen and where they make sense. The public transit one is always a tough one, because if you truly want to go the public transit route, you're going to have to rely on, I don't know, out this way, like Worcester, I guess. Which one? Right, or the commuter rail, yeah. But sort of like internal to the city, to get around the city, it would probably be like the Worcester Regional Transit Authority if they make it out this far. Or you'd have to think about some kind of like a circulator shuttle, maybe a public-private venture. But those are really challenging financially, because
We
they
do-
don't pay for themselves, so
We
there's
have
gonna
our
need to
own
be-
transit, the Metro West Regional Transit,
Oh, you are in the MW?
and they are actually increasing the routes. They're not increasing?
They are, it's just, it hasn't, I was just gonna say, if Linda's watching at home, I apologize, we're not supposed to announce it until Monday, but the shuttle service that we've provided since 2019 is being implemented into their routes, their permanent routes.
And
So you'll
that's-
have direct transit to the Southwest Quadrant.
That is good to hear because, you know, if we are going to be building, you know, housing units or any of the stuff in the city, especially around Main Street, like, and we're only providing certain amounts of parking, like, a lot of these people are going to rely on this transportation. So you know, it's great to hear that there is expansion on that.
Just don't tell anyone, all right?
I won't
Thank
tell
you.
anyone.
But even the other, the normal routes that go through the city, they have expanded the hours, the numbers of, and as we have approved apartment complexes, we've put in the special permit that they need to provide information about those. They need to provide a bus stop if,
The problem was that the 7C did not go to that area of the city.
right, yes.
So we've now, our pilot program is now becoming a permanent route, which means that it will go through the Southwest Quadrant to the downtown. So that is one,
That is good to hear because,
Yeah.
you know, we are a small city, but we are also a very large city, right? So that's something that has been, I wouldn't say lacking, but definitely needed. So that's great to hear.
kudos to the mayor on that because he's been working with Jim Nee at WM, trying to make that happen. But to your point, it does come with a cost, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. And a point to add to just make about schools and students, like some of the counselors do have a point where, you know, we built these developments, you know, in the city and they might not have had kids, you know, back then, but now they're full of kids now, or students. So that is, I think, definitely something to look for in the future because as there's less and less housing in the city, in downtown, in this area, these families are gonna have to go somewhere, right? And if they can afford it, they're gonna move out to these new developments. If they can't afford it, they're gonna move out somewhere else, right? They're not gonna stay in the city. So that is definitely something to consider, and that .07 number, I believe is what it was, is obviously gonna fluctuate, right? It's not a steady, hard number. So it's something to definitely take into consideration as we continue to expand our city. In that Southwest Quadrant, I was looking at the open space plan. There isn't much there that is highlighted as either protected or green space or anything. So it is interesting to see because looking at a satellite image, right, you do see a lot of green space there, right? And then you see the parking lots from these warehouses like DuPont and all these other industries. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what that expansion actually looks like who owns these plots of land and are we wanting to add housing as well as like industrial, or like is it going to be kind of a mixed use kind of plan, because there is potential there to have that open space element. So I don't know if you can expand on a little on that.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the Southwest Quadrant's a unique area where it's traditionally been more commercial, industrial, and I guess you could argue as a city council whether that's an appropriate place for like an expansive park system or something, or whether that money would be better spent on parks where people, you know, live and have better access to. But I think in an area like, let's say, for example, like the Nickerson Road area that we talked about, let's say that in the future that's rezoned and you're working with the property owners, I think it would be a great idea to say to them, you have a pretty big area in which you could think about redeveloping. We would love to see some kind of central plaza, central park, because you're gonna have people living here as well as people working nearby. So there may be ways to integrate private open space that could be publicly accessible.
Yeah.
So you don't have to maintain it. Someone else builds it and you have that amenity, you know, in that area. So that could be an option where the city doesn't necessarily have to pay to acquire land, pay to build it, and then ultimately pay to maintain it.
Understood. I was also just reading up on that chapter 40B. So we are pretty close to that threshold. What are your thoughts on providing affordable housing to our residents? Because I believe it's Metro West Housing Coalition, something like that. I don't remember the acronym, but they had a presentation where they polled quite a few residents in the city. You know, a lot of the burden, financial burden, is cost of living and actual, like, being able to afford where they live. So I believe it's like 75% of the people interviewed had to make a choice between paying their rent or paying the mortgage and paying, you know, other bills. How do we as a council support those residents and provide for potential new residents that would possibly need this affordable housing?
Yeah, so I mean, like as a city, you're sort of limited in the options because you don't build, you know, like the city doesn't build housing, right? So you're sort of limited in the options. So one is, you know, the city has an inclusionary zoning policy where a percentage of new units in a market rate development have to be set aside for households, I think, at or below 80% of the area median income. So as new market rate developments are built, some percentage of those units will be set aside for deed restricted affordable. Now, those are at 80%, so household incomes at 80% in Massachusetts and the Boston MSA are still pretty high.
It's tough. Yeah.
Right? So the folks who need the most help are typically 50% and below. That's often the piece of the market where like housing authorities come into play. So one of the suggestions that we had was sort of to work with Marlboro's community housing organization to try to figure out, you know, does the city have excess land that you don't need that you could potentially dispose of for affordable housing development, either for them or maybe done by the private sector through an RFP process? Would the city want to come to the table with any kind of financial resources or tax abatement resources to sort of encourage affordable housing development? You could go the route of a local initiative project, a LIP, which is sort of you hear like the term friendly 40B. So it's like a city-initiated 40B project working hand in hand with a developer, where that would count both on your SHI and get a larger percentage of deed restricted units than your inclusionary zoning would. The city could offer its own sort of like a Section 8 HUD program, but it could be a local rental voucher program. But again, it costs money, or it has some form of city resource that needs to go to it. Yeah. So I think the council just needs to think about, you know, what do you want to do? What can you do within the financial means that you have to work with? I mean, there's a ton of options, and we listed a bunch of them in the main document of the plan.
Yeah, I did see that. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, sure.
All right, Councilor Fricillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Director Harris, Eric, thank you guys for being here, and thank you for the presentation tonight. Just a couple of quick comments. I don't want to echo a lot of my colleagues, but just a big thank you for putting this together. I know a lot of residents that I've reached out to, they've had a lot of questions, especially concerning, right, evaluating capacity in the city, having some forward thinking, right, ideas about where we're going and what the next 5, 10, 20 years could look like as a city. And so I think this is the start of many conversations that we've already been having as a council, but an opportunity, and Councilor Navin touched on this, but to, get some community feedback, work with the community. I'd be happy to work on that, both in my ward. I know other councilors would as well. So, let's put our heads together and see how we can get this out there to the public. More specifically speaking, one of the things that you touched on early in the presentation that I really appreciated was diversifying our core industries, right, as a city. And so kind of tying back to economic development, on pages 35 and 36, you listed a couple of the target industries for Marlboro and kind of where we should be looking and where we should be going. And obviously, right, we're looking for industry that, we're going to see employment growth and is also regionally competitive. Is there anything kind of that we should be targeting right now? I know you gave a couple of examples. A lot of them we kind of already have ties into, right, whether it's software publishing or manufacturing in some capacity. Is there kind of a unicorn out there that you think we should really be, given some focus to, or is this a conversation to be had later?
I don't know if there's necessarily, and Eric may disagree with me, but I don't know if there's a unicorn per se, but one thing that's not in the main body of the plan, because we developed it more for MEDC and staff, was we did a deep dive into all those target industries, and we provided MEDC with a ton of information about each of them. So where are they located, who are the big targets, what are they looking for. But the other thing is the supply chain, up and down the supply chain. So if you have a software company that sits in the middle of that supply chain because they're developing software, they have things that are coming in as inputs, and then certainly they're selling a product as an output. So in those targets, we actually suggested like synergies and supply chains. So you might only be attracting or housing one component within that entire target industry. There might actually be other things that want to co-locate with each other. So we actually focused a bit of effort more on that than saying, oh yeah, you should go and design some kind of an incentive program to attract this thing. Like, I don't know, not that I'm saying you should do this, but like data centers, right? That's the big thing everybody's talking about. Not a lot of jobs, tons of revenue, but comes with a lot of potential challenges as well. Like, we don't have something like that in the report.
No, I appreciate that. I think that gives a better glimpse as to how we're thinking as a city, right? We're being holistic in kind of what business exists now and how we can branch out and kind of support what's already existing while also diversifying, our own portfolio as a city. So, kind of shifting gears back to housing a little bit. I appreciate the answer. My last question. You mentioned the missing middle. Kind of what does that look like? What are some examples of that kind of housing that we could see? And are there other communities that are tapping into this, at least in this area or maybe in this Commonwealth, that kind of already, laid a little bit of a framework that we might be able to work off from?
Yeah, so missing middle is typically anything from like a like your classic New England triple decker, up to maybe a smaller apartment building with, let's say it's 15 units or less or 20 units or less. So it's not the single family and two family, and it's not the 50 plus unit multifamily, right? That we're seeing those ends of the barbell. It's like everything in between, for a variety of reasons, it's just not being built or it's not allowed. So it could be, as we heard some of the counselors say before, like a townhouse development that lines the street. It could be smaller garden style apartments that, like I lived in Malden, for example, for a long time, and you would walk down the streets closer to Malden Center in the downtown, you would see these like 6 or 8 unit brick apartment buildings that are nestled in between a 2-family and a single family and a 3-family. It's stuff like that. And again, that style of development may not be appropriate in every neighborhood in Marlboro, but there may be select locations where it's on the edge of a district that's a transition between, like, let's say the Village Center, which is a little bit more dense, and a traditional Marlboro neighborhood. There may be like locations in there where that could be a good fit. I'm trying to think of like places that are successful with the kind of missing middle. I'd have to think a little bit about that. It's hard, so yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, no, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate the answer to the questions, and thank you, Madam Chair.
And Councilor Irish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. I definitely like the key economic trends, going forward for the city, though trends can certainly change here or there. One of my comments certainly was when Hannaford's decided not to lease any more space down Route 20 West. The residents were very happy that someone else is going to be coming in to take over that space. And so the thing, and I know it's not the most important thing, certainly when you're building software or engineering departments and things like that, but a lot of residents do have that fear that are they going to lose their local supermarket. And I do know that when people were shopping at Hannaford's, now when it was closed, they were no longer utilizing some of the other stores. So I didn't know how that trend is. Is it just by population, how that trend, because I know when I was a lot younger, there was always these neighborhood stores. And so I was very happy to see that we would be able to retain that down West End. I don't know if you have any updates on when things could be turning around, but that was certainly important for the residents.
Are you asking when is Shaw's opening?
Yeah. If you can.
Wasn't it on Facebook?
Memorial Day weekend. So, couple more weeks.
Oh, wait,
End of May, yes.
And again, that was really important for the residents, because when that closed, like I said, a lot of residents weren't be able to go use our local, utilize those stores. So I support this, and I do like the economic trends. You have to have that forward thinking on all facets of any kind of economic parts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Doucette.
Thank you much, Madam Chair. This is more trying to understand the process going forward from here. You said this is an early draft of the presentation. Are you going to come back for another draft, or are we going to accept and place on file this one?
Well, I guess for me, what I thought would happen is sort of in looking at what they did in 2013, I think our homework is starting on page 34 with the theme 1, going through the rest of the report where there are actions. Some of us have already identified a few we do not agree with. What do we agree with? What do we want removed from here? So that if we adopt this as a council's master plan, it's what we want. MEDC could disagree, but I see another meeting where we take a deeper dive into this. And I don't even know if, I mean, there is the piece of the kind of putting it all together with who's the lead entity and the short-term, medium, long-term. What is the short-term? What does it mean? Just because there's an action, streamlined permitting, what does that mean? How do you streamline the permitting? You have to go in and redo the permitting. So there's a lot of actions that I see almost then need the detail of what exactly is that action, and is there a timeline to make sure that it's done? If we never do it, then what was the point of having it as an action? So my homework for everybody would to take each of these themes that then have some action to it. Are there other actions you want? Are there actions we don't want? And where do we go? And Councilor Navin, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things, but to just answer to that, one of the things I want to be careful of, or I think we should be careful of, is, again, approving this document, accepting this document, making changes to this document, I think are all well and good. Again, there are pieces of this that I don't agree with wholeheartedly. There are some things that I don't approve of. I think we could all probably, right, we could throw out the commercial tax rate for multifamily homes. But I also think we should be careful there are good strategies here. And again, there are good strategies that I don't agree with. But I wouldn't want to shortchange the potential for future people who are silly enough to run for city council and sit in these seats. I don't want them to not have some of that information just because I don't agree with it, and I don't want to see it happen in our community. I don't think we should only be taking the good. So I agree wholeheartedly. We should definitely come back. We should have a further discussion about this. We should talk about these things, but I guess I'm just careful. I think we should be careful about the next steps, and we should be thoughtful about the next steps, because I do appreciate having the whole picture of that piece.
Well, I think much like the mayor's CIP, which is a 5-year plan that's then looked at for the next 5 years, I don't want this to wait for 12 years before we see the next plan. So if there are things that we remove from here, that doesn't mean that a future council couldn't add them back in, or even things that we put in here, if we don't accomplish, that they could still not accomplish going forward.
No, I agree with that. I guess I would just also say, right, so just because it's in here doesn't mean that it's we will use it certainly for talking points when we argue about the next housing proposal, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do something one way or the other. So I do wonder. It's a nice, in this regard, I think it becomes, a compass document for us about the direction most of us want to head, so I agree. I think we should do that. Just a couple of other comments and questions I wanted to make. One, I love the logo. I think it's great. I think it's clean. I think maybe
I can't take credit for that.
maybe I love the logo. I mean, a couple more Marlboro-centric buildings added into it, I think could have been, if there's a stock image of Marlboro buildings that are drawn, that would be awesome.
There's no tower, no water tower.
Yeah, so, but no, I like that. It's clean and it's good looking. So the other question on housing, and this is where my mind went to when you guys talked about the middle that doesn't exist, is, and we talk about the need for single-family housing, we talk about the need for, starter homes. I saw somewhere, I know the administration filed in one bill about basically like starter home zones where, right, it would be limited to like 1,800 square feet, the frontage would be reduced, things like that. Not that we've got huge swaths of land, although there is one in particular that is a very large parcel of land in our community that may have a housing proposal. Are you seeing that anywhere else, and is that an opportunity to kind of say, you know, and is there, right, this all comes down, like everything else, it all comes down to economics. It all comes down to whether there's a developer that can make some money to build the project, and then is there a buyer? But are there any opportunities for that? Are you seeing that anywhere? Is that applicable here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the starter home district is relatively new, so I'd have to check and see if anybody's adopted anything.
I just didn't know if like the proposal came out of like a successful use case or anything like that. So
I think it was state, sort of the administration
Like
trying
HLC
to,
wanted to-
trying to figure out, how do we move the needle on some of these things that,
Fair enough.
we just can't.
It was state-generated, and they finally came out with the regulations. My understanding with the meeting that I had, there are 2 communities that are looking at doing it. I had talked to Councilor Ossing and had not actually created the order, but for us to investigate looking at adding it to zoning, because I do think it is something we need to think about. And I agree that there are some potential lots that could fit into the scheme of things, and I think that it does then allow a developer to, rather than take a small piece of property like the subdivisions that we've seen on Pleasant Street, on Hosmer, and on Stowe, where they're taking 6 and 7 acres and sticking 10 or 11 houses that are costing $1 million, because that's what it's costing them to buy the land and to build the housing. They want their money back. Can we wind up with a house that is really affordable for that middle, that is a $400,000 house? Would someone build it, becomes the bigger question, because they want their money, and all the costs are all the same for the infrastructure, the building permits are all the same, the materials are the same. They need less material because they're building less house. But,
Less land, but yeah, it's tough.
I think that it's worth the conversation, so I haven't gotten to that point yet, but as far as I know, nobody else has actually adopted the regulations. There are 2 communities, I think it was Lexington, and I forgot the other, that have it on their plate but haven't done it. So it's too new.
Do you need a motion to postpone?
Oh,
Sorry, no, never mind.
Councilor Preciado.
Thank you, Madam. So what I see with this document is I essentially see like this piece, as a piece of a larger, map for us, right? We have other plans we can work off of. I agree with Councilor Navin that, we should keep this here for future reference in some form, but, this could work as a big jumping off point for something that we would want to develop for ourselves and really customize, for our needs. I think you guys did an incredible amount of work. But it is missing some of the, the elements like, we should consider the open space plan in it, as well as, other factors. So, I would also like to see this going to the public as well. So, a nice little tour of the plan would be amazing. And I can also host
I was gonna say,
my community
I
as
would
well.
appreciate everybody's help to find ways to get it out to residents in particular. The business community, we've got that covered, but residents, I would love to partner with any of you.
Yeah, I can help facilitate that, because, a lot of the residents in Ward 3 are being directly impacted by a lot of the expansion that's happening, because a lot of the expansion that's happening is in Ward 3. So I do get a lot of emails, I get a lot of phone calls, probably more than anyone else here about development. But I would love to help lend a hand in that.
And I know I did try to get the community advocate to advertise the forward plan in this meeting tonight. They did not put anything in the paper, unfortunately. I used Facebook. I used as much as I could to provide the public the opportunity to do input tonight. You saw we had 2 people. So I don't know how much I hope it's not lack of interest. I think the word is out there that this meeting was available. I don't know if this is just too much information to sort of absorb and figure out what to say exactly. There is a lot there. The two people that spoke did great job of reading and bringing points forward to us. So I don't know how much to me, we have two options. We can say, thank you, MEDC, it's your document, move forward with it. And we'll cooperate as much as we can, or we as a city council can also adopt it as our plan, in which case I think we need to take a deeper dive into this so that we are in agreement with the action plans. And if we're not, then why are we approving it? So, Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to see any responses from taking this show on the road, getting feedback from the community, business development, et cetera. So not only are we providing input and modifying, but we're also getting feedback from the community through you folks. So what you presented here is just today's draft. You know, at some point in the future, after you've done your dog and pony a couple of times, there's a different draft that we may need to go look at, and then also put our comments in as well. So this, you know, input's coming from multiple places, we're just one of them, we're not the only ones. I just want to make sure that that type of input from the community is still getting involved in involving this presentation. So,
And it's, I know
so
reading.
I assume you guys are still going to own the current drafts going forward, so more drafts come to us, right?
My understanding from the 2011 plan was a lot of public input, and I could be wrong, but I thought in reading the beginning of it, it talked about meetings with stakeholders and not just business stakeholders. So I don't know if that was a little bit different the way it was done versus this
I wasn't
report.
here, so I can't
Yeah,
really speak to it.
I know you
I know
weren't,
that when
so.
they did the 2014 downtown zoning, there was a lot of public input.
There was a lot of
Damon was
public-
actually very active in that.
Yes.
But Linda was, so I can certainly ask her in the office tomorrow how they did it.
Yeah, so I don't know if that was your plan to take this as on the road to the public and then bring back a revised something, or?
Honestly, we're looking for you to tell us what you'd like the plan to be, because we're doing this on behalf of the city. We work for you. So whatever you guys would like it to be, that's what we're going to be charged with doing.
All right, and I guess I don't see this as something that has to be done by a date certain, although it would be nice to have it, because as I said, we do have projects coming to us that sort of impact what we might think about doing differently if they get approved, how that fits into the scheme of things.
The one last comment I want to make, this is all made possible by that planning money that's in our budget. So I just want folks to understand that that's where those funds are going directly towards these types of efforts.
Yep, and I think that's pretty clear, that that's what that's for. I know I may have a use for your next round of planning money on a different project, but I'll get there. Counselor Nabin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Up until Meredith made her second to last point, I had a different comment. I'm going to make the same comment though. Perhaps they're not mutually exclusive, right? You had kind of alluded to the fact that like we can adopt this as our guiding document, or we can say good luck MEDC, and this is yours. And I'm going to motion to postpone, but I also think we should all kind of think about that. It can be both, right? If we want to put, right, I still think there is a value in having the information out there, whether or not we all decide that we agree to adopt all of the tenets of it or not. And so perhaps there are two paths that we go forward. And I think that at the next meeting, when it's not 20 to 10, we can all have some thoughts about that. And so with that, I motion to postpone to a future meeting.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to postpone. I will work with Meredith, talk to counselors to see how we want to move forward with this, and with no further comments, all in
Adjourn.
favor?
We got to vote first on the
We're
motion.
postponing. Move to
I didn't think
postpone.
Okay.
this and set a date for a future meeting. We'll do that first. Everybody agree to postpone?
Yep.
All right, now, I guess we'll take an official vote. All agree to postpone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, now we can move to.
Motion to adjourn.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. It is 9:40, we'll say, 9:39. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you. We are adjourned.